As soon as I entered the festival gates, I was struck by the scent of burning sage, cultural heritage of Minneapolis. Celebration, although it wasn't exactly where I was looking for my next environmental story. Eugene, my editor, had been explicit about extending our reporting beyond stories about corporate pollution. I passed vendors selling as I made my way through the tangle of booths, anything from organic honey to hand-woven fabrics. The sense of cinnamon and wood smoke permeated the October air, making I regret not packing a heavier jacket in place of my go-to city reporter blazer. Then I noticed it. A ceramic demonstration that completely stopped me in my tracks. With hands that resembled tree bark, an elderly craftsman formed clay, explaining ancient methods to a small group of people. As he explained sustainable practices, his voice carried the weight of generations, used for centuries by his ancestors. He was saying, pressing complex buttons, "The earth gives back what we give to it." Designs into clay that is wet only when we pay attention. I moved closer, taking notes. Already out? When another person thought of the same thing, at the precise moment, a blonde woman wearing hiking boots stepped forward. The instant I did, we both reached for the same location close to the potter's wheel. Our shoulders collided violently. "Sorry," she stated, taking a step back with a casual smile that briefly caused me to lose my professional poise. She possessed the kind of self-assurance that resulted from being outside, hands drenched in sunlight, lines of laughter surrounding blue eyes that appeared to absorb everything at once. "No issue," I pointed to the protest. "Incredible craftsmanship. By the way, my name is Marie, journalist for the environment." Ariana, her interest in the potter's work was sincere. Mountain guide. Few reporters are present at cultural celebrations. Research never ends. I made notes about conventional clay, sourcing techniques. "You live nearby." Though I work all over Minnesota, I was born here, mostly wilderness tours. I connected her voice to those who spent their days creating life because it was steady, or choices about death on the slopes of mountains. After completing his piece, the potter put it aside to dry. The audience started to scatter, but neither Ariana nor I left the booth. The environment. She picked up one of the completed bowls to inspect its surface and remarked, "Journeying must keep you busy these days." Feel more than I would like. There seems to be a new story about corporations destroying pristine wilderness every week. Regions. I observed her carefully and reverently handling the pottery. "You probably witnessed the impact firsthand." Her expression changed more than most people would think. "Travel generates revenue. However, it also causes issues. It's a delicate balance." I was interested in that. "Would you be open to discussing that at some point?" For the record, she put the bowl down after giving it careful thought. "Depending on what sort of narrative you intend to write, the truthful kind." We simply stared at one another for a while. Something moved between us, perhaps a recognition of common values or professional interests. Whatever it was caused my heart rate to increase in a manner unrelated to obtaining a reliable source. "This is my card." She produced a business card that had a subtle pine tree scent. "Encourage wilderness guides. If you're serious about learning the truth, give me a call." Effects of outdoor recreation on the environment. My fingers briefly touched hers as I accepted the card. I take my work seriously." "Excellent." She appeared to be taking more than business seriously, based on her smile. "Just a heads up. However, you will need to get your hands dirty if you want the real story." Before I could reply, she left, leaving me feeling as though this festival had given me exactly what I was looking for, and perhaps even something had not anticipated discovering. A small storefront between a coffee shop and Foster Wilderness Guides, and a Grand Avenue used bookshop. Professional images of Minnesota's wilderness were on display in the window, places that, in contrast, made the walls of my apartment feel cramped. As I pushed through the door, a bell chimed. Ariana peered up from behind a counter, covered in equipment catalogs and topographical maps. "Marie," she appeared to. "I'm really happy to see you. I didn't think you would call." Professional curiosity prevailed. I pointed to the outdoor equipment lining the walls. "Amazing work. 20 years of amassing the finest equipment available." "Purchase?" She walked around the counter with the same effortless assurance I had observed during the festival. "Coffee?" I was merely creating a few. The interview got off to a sufficiently professional start. I inquired about seasonal effects and tourism trends, variances, the precarious equilibrium between environmental preservation and economic necessity. Ariana's responses showed a breadth of expertise that far exceeded the marketing of standard guide services. "The majority of tourists desire Instagram photos," she said, pouring coffee from an upscale-looking coffee maker. "I don't understand their trampling rare plant communities." Device. My group insisted on camping in a protected watershed area last month. As I described the rules, they promised to reimburse me twice as much. "Have you taken the money?" "Hell, no." She gave a sharp laugh. "Not everything is for sale." I made notes. Her principled stance impressed me. Dealing with that attitude all the time must be annoying. That's the reason I'm picky about who you work with these days. She gave me a mug that had a divine scent to it. Prioritize quality over quantity. Better for the wilderness and for business, I said carefully. Talking about quality clients. Would you mind showing me some of these impact sites for the article? She looked at me through her coffee cup. Have you ever gone hiking seriously? Describe seriousness, not just a walk in Minnehaha Park. Heat rose, I noticed, in my cheeks, not precisely. A city girl? She wasn't mocking. Though, an excursion over the weekend would be suitable. I could show you 3 distinct ecosystems and describe how each is impacted by tourism, provide you with actual data rather than theoretical debates. The pragmatic journalist in me was aware that this was precisely what the narrative required. The other side of me, which had been considering her ever since the festival, pondered if it made sense to spend a weekend in the wilderness by yourself with Ariana. What sort of dedication are we discussing here? I tried to speak in a neutral tone. 1 night, 2 days, simple camping equipment, moderately challenging hiking terrain. If you're reasonably fit, nothing is too much for you to handle. I reflected on my gym membership, which perhaps twice a month. Fittingly, yes, her grin indicated that she wasn't totally persuaded. All of the technical equipment is provided by me. All you need are appropriate clothes and boots. My mobile buzzed. The screen flashed Eugene's name. Please pardon me. I moved aside to respond. Henderson. Where's that environmental piece at? Marie. Eugene's. There was the usual impatience in the voice. Having a meeting with sources now should result in something significant by next week. Excellent. Corporate wants more impact and bigger stories. Whatever you are working on, make it worthwhile. After I hung up, Ariana was observing me with interest. A demanding boss. She inquired. The editor is constantly looking for the next big story. I returned the phone to my pocket. Which leads me to your offer. When would we be able to embark on this expedition? If you can take this weekend off, that works for me. There was something in her voice. Made me take a closer look at her. There was a level of intensity that wasn't there during our professional conversation. Overnight camping, I said slowly. Typical procedure for access to the backcountry. I want to show you a few places that are hours away from any road. The logical answer would be to recommend day trips as an alternative, but logical answers wouldn't provide me with the kind of narrative Eugene desired, and they would most certainly not quench the interest that had grown since our initial encounter. Okay, I heard, I said. Let's do it. Perfect. Her whole face lit up with a smile. Get together. I'll be here at precisely 7 on Saturday morning. Marie, please bring layers. Minnesota. In the backcountry, the weather can change quickly. I became aware that I was already making plans as I made my way back to my car. Prepare for the weekend. This had nothing more to do with getting a good story. That's what I at least kept telling myself. 7:0 arrived early. I was outside Foster Wilderness Guides, wondering what the hell I had gotten myself into, with boots that pinched my feet and a borrowed backpack. Are you prepared to experience Minnesota wilderness for the first time? Ariana came out of her store with a pack that it appeared to weigh more than I did. Define ready, she chuckled. I was starting to associate that simple sound with her assurance, you will succeed. Believe me. We drove north past suburbs and strip malls until we reached civilization, progressively became more forest-like. I tried not to think about how excellent Ariana was as she discussed soil erosion patterns, had a scent, pine soap in fresh air. Perhaps, she said, first stop, as she pulled into a trailhead parking lot, pristine watershed that is, until the previous year. The trail began fairly easily, meandering through tall pines that blotted out the majority of the morning light. My city lungs were functioning in 20 minutes, more difficult than they had in months. Calm down, Ariana said, not even gasping for air. We have the entire day, she said, stopped often to highlight damage caused by careless hikers, trampled vegetation, illicit fire rings, and litter, concealed by trees. Every gesture and every word she used showed how passionate she was about preservation. She adjusted her pack straps and said, this is where it gets interesting. There is some scurrying involved in this next section. Over stones. Remain near. Close meant trailing closely behind her as she negotiated a set of granite stones. During a particularly challenging section, she reached back to steady me, but her hand unexpectedly gripped mine. Power. Something in her voice caused me to look up into those blue eyes as she whispered, easy. For a while, we were motionless, neither of us attempting to break the contact, her hand still warm against mine. Thanks, I finally managed to say, moving past her and onto a level surface. In the afternoon, the terrain became more steep, and I began to appreciate Ariana's endurance, my slower pace and city girl inquiries about everything from signs pointing to the sounds of wildlife Around 4:00, she declared that a storm was approaching while observing the dark clouds that were gathering to the west. Now we have to set up camp. How do you know? 20 years of reading. Weather in Minnesota. She was already looking for good camping locations in the forest. Additionally, the drop in pressure is making my old knee pain. She picked a protected spot between two enormous oaks, then started moving quickly to unpack the equipment. I made an effort to assist, but I mostly just stood there feeling worthless while she put together our makeshift house. I watched her shake out what seemed to be a small tent, appeared to be insufficient fabric for a single person. In backcountry hiking, weight matters. We'll get by. The initial drop of rain began to fall as soon as she had secured the final guideline. After we had relocated our packs indoors, the storm was letting loose rage that made the thin walls of my apartment appear opulent. I said, cozy, knowing full well that cozy indicated that our sleeping bags were in contact. Ariana took out a small camp stove and said, could be worse. We'll eat, at least, hot food. The dehydrated pasta for dinner tasted better than it should have. We dined in pleasant quiet while we listened to the rain pounding the tent fly overhead. Tell me about your writing, she said. Eventually, how did you become interested in environmental journalism? I found myself discussing early college idealism, career setbacks, and the slow realization that minor details could lead to significant transformations. She paid attention with sincere interest, posing intelligent queries that demonstrated she had truly taken in what I had to say. It's your turn, I stated. Why did you decide on guiding instead of a typical indoor job? Her grin was, Rofal, after college, I tried working in the corporate world for precisely 6 months. It was similar to wearing ill-fitting clothing. Thus, you simply left. It was more like running while screaming. She moved around in her sleeping bag, rubbing up against my shoulder. Not everyone is suited for a cubicle. As the rain grew heavier, it drummed more urgently against the tent. The room felt intimate in spite of the high-tech fabric in a way that its size had nothing to do with it. Marie, Ariana said softly. Yes, I ought to. I should probably point out that I don't typically take clients on overnight excursions. Something complicated happened in my heart. You made an exception. But why? She remained silent for a while. Sincere response. Always. Because of that. And because you asked the right questions at the festival. Her voice faltered. Because in the gloom she looked at me. Because ever since we first met, you have been on my mind constantly. The disclosure hovered between us like electricity. I could only hear my own heartbeat as thunder rolled through the forest outside. I understand. Ariana, she went on, this makes things more difficult professionally. But I needed you to know, before I could question. I leaned forward and gave her a gentle, hesitant, and then deeper kiss. Her hand found the back of my neck. Fingers tangled in my hair as she answered with unexpected vigor. We were both breathing erratically when we finally parted ways. Well, that definitely complicates things, she said in a whisper, laughing breathlessly. Yeah, it does. Monday morning at the office was like coming back from a different planet. I sat at my desk, looking at a blank document that should become my environmental narrative. But I couldn't get Saturday night in that tent out of my head. The kiss had been fleeting, interrupted by a thunderclap that shook the forest as a whole, and we both abruptly separated, gasping for air, conscious of the lines we might be crossing. The remainder of the night had been spent in cautious civility and restless sleep. Sleeping bags that were both too close and too far apart. The return hike on Sunday had been expertly done. Friendly, secure. Ariana texted me, and my phone buzzed. I hope you responded. The city. All right. Thanks for a fascinating weekend. I typed and erased 3 distinct. Janet from reception called out, Floyd's looking for you. Before deciding on something equally neutral, in conference room B, I discovered my coworker Floyd Henderson bent over spreadsheets, his hair always rumpled. Marie, how is your wilderness adventure? He said in a shirt that gave the impression that he had once again fallen asleep in the office. I maintained a level voice while making subtle fun of the statement. Get everything you needed from your nature guide. Research is ongoing. Eugene is looking for budget estimates for your environmental series. How many more field trips are we planning? Did you need it? Talking about, I was wary of something in his face. Floyd had always been competitive, but recently his interest in my assignments seemed more focused. It depends on how the story develops, I said. He took note on his pad. Right? Story development. This guide. Ariana Foster is your primary source and the only one you have. He didn't smile, but he said, just making sure we're getting value for our research expenses. How well do? The question felt heavy. You know her background. She's professional, knowledgeable, and experienced. Professional. That's good to know. Floyd stood and gathered his documents. Eugene wants to observe progress by the end of the week. Avoid letting personal relationships influence your decision-making. Phrase followed me back to my desk. where I worked on nothing productive for the next 3 hours. Marie, Ariana's voice sounded different on the phone when she called it around 2:00 p.m. I've been thinking about our conversation from this past weekend, but I'm not sure which one it was. Which one she was referring to? The expert one about conducting more research. Pause. I believe I can set up access to a few websites that would significantly improve your article. That would be beneficial. The evidence is located approximately 2 hours north of significant environmental harm caused by illicit mining operations. This information is not yet available to the public. My journalist. Watershed contamination, the kind that sharpened instincts. How serious impacts 3 counties' drinking water. Her voice was remote but full of real concern. The logical answer would be to recommend bringing a photographer, making it a larger overnight excursion. Production. However, my instantaneous affirmative response was unrelated to professional considerations. When? This weekend? If that's okay with you, after Saturday. The last thing I wanted to do was spend another night kissing and Sunday carefully avoiding, I heard myself say. I'll need to clear it with Eugene. After spending the night by myself in the wilderness with Ariana, professional considerations. Of course, her tone was completely neutral, but I could listen to the question below. Were we going to act as though Saturday night had never occurred? Were we going to uphold Ariana? Yes, on Saturday night, while they were sharing tents and building fires at professional distance. Silence. If it complicates things, we don't need to discuss it. Complicate matters. I understand. Her tone grew softer. But, Marie, what? After we hung up, I spent another hour staring at my computer screen without typing a word. But the complications are worth it. Word. Eugene called as Floyd passed my desk twice, both times looking at my blank document with apparent satisfaction. At 4:30, I entered his office. Henderson. Environmental status report. Peace. Moving forward, I have a big new perspective. Illegal mining, operations impacting local water supplies. His eyes glowed with the sly gleam I had come to associate with stories that could win awards. How important, maybe the front page, material. But in order to properly document everything, I need to go on another research trip. Do it. Whatever you need. He leaned back in his chair. This might be just the impactful story that corporate is looking for. Returning to my desk, Floyd appeared next to me and asked, in a fake casual way, another research trip with your wilderness guide. I'll follow the story wherever it takes me. I said, that's correct. Smiled that disagreeable smile once more. Keep in mind, Marie, that professional ethics are important, particularly when personal. Relationships could make it harder to be objective. I stopped walking. Floyd, what are you really saying? Nothing. At all. It was just a colleague's kind words. But as he left, I became aware that Floyd was curious about my sources. It wasn't just a passing interest. He was somehow monitoring my research techniques, so he might already be more knowledgeable concerning my relationship with Ariana than I felt comfortable with. At dawn, we began the drive north, nursing each other, coffee in the darkness before sunrise. Ariana had brought a bigger tent this time, and she mentioned something about the weather, predictions that seemed like a pretext for other factors. The mining location is located farther in the wilderness compared to last weekend, she explained, negotiating meandering forest roads. We'll have to hike roughly 6 miles to enter the area of contamination. How did you learn about this? Expert. Her hands gripped the steering wheel as network guides discussed wildlife patterns and water quality changes with one another. Wheel tighter. The trail was more difficult than our first expedition. But it's bad. This one has been kept quiet, my chest constricted due to the steeper terrain, more rugged surroundings, and signs of environmental damage caused by humans. With rage. By midday, we arrived at a valley that ought to have been a pristine wilderness, but instead displayed obvious indications of illicit excavation. Damn, I muttered as I gazed at the scarred hillsides, as well as a creek that rust-cold through dead vegetation. Gets worse upstream. It's about another mile to the main operation, Ariana said grimly. We recorded. Ariana was able to identify the best angles to display the damage, while I made notes on the water. Dead trees, discoloration, and a lack of wildlife sounds. This type of environmental damage would create headlines, I whispered, taking pictures of a section. Corporate executives should be criminally charged for this, where chemical runoff had left the creekbed orange. They will be if your story gets the right attention. My phone began to ring at about 400 p. May. Henderson, I couldn't identify the number, automatically responded. Thankfully, someone did. The voice was female. I'm looking for rescue services because I'm scared and unfamiliar. My friend Sarah Chen she was supposed to check in yesterday, but she's missing on the Elk Ridge Trail system. You have the wrong number. I began to, please, I've been phoning everyone. She has experience. She would not simply vanish. Something's incorrect. I turned to face Ariana, who had paused her documentation to listen, and she held Oriana Foster, Wilderness Guide, holds out her hand for the phone. Where was your friend last seen? The ensuing discussion disclosed that Sarah Chen was a lone hiker who had organized a 3-day backcountry journey she had missed her scheduled check-in by 18 hours. So we need to get in touch with Search and after obtaining the caller's contact details, Ariana said. Rescue. But since we're already nearby, we could begin initial search activities. How about our narrative analysis? Sarah Chen's life is more significant than our timetable. Her firm tone recalled the reasons I had been drawn to her honesty in the first location. For the next 3 hours, we hiked in Sarah's direction, calling her name and searching for indications of her passage. Ariana read tracks and moved with expert efficiency and meticulously examining possible shelter locations. There, she said abruptly, indicating a flash of the trail led downhill toward a creek crossing, and the red cloth that appeared to be a piece of a backpack was caught on a pine branch, where we discovered additional evidence, including strewn about equipment and obvious indications of a serious fall on wet rocks. Sarah and Ariana's. A faint reply came from downstream as the voice reverberated across the canyon. Can you hear me? We discovered Sarah Chen wedged, conscious but hypothermic after spending the night in cold, damp conditions between 2 boulders with a clearly broken ankle. Circumstances. Thank God, Sarah muttered as Ariana started preparing an emergency shelter. I believed I was going to pass away. Ariana firmly stated, not on my watch, and began administering first aid. Materials. I observed them cooperating to stabilize Sarah and get her ready for evacuation. Ariana changes into a totally different person than the one who had kissed me in our tent the weekend before. Ariana was having a great time, self-assured, competent, and totally committed to saving the life of someone. As we awaited the rescue helicopter she had summoned via satellite, I remarked, "You're good at this. Telephone. You're not bad yourself," she said. Her smile warmed despite her 20 years of practice. For a city girl, thank you. I believe the helicopter vanished. Sarah was safely on board, and we were left alone with our camping supplies and the increasing consciousness as we ventured into the darkening sky that we just had a meaningful conversation. Situations involving life or death had a way of removing all pretense. As we pitched our tent in the encroaching darkness, I remarked, so much for documenting the mining site today. Tomorrow, we're celebrating saving someone's life tonight. She had brought a lightweight bottle of wine. We sat by our little campfire, passing it back and forth as they talked about what had happened that day. Slowly, the topic of discussion changed from Sarah's escape to more intimate subjects. That's something I've never done before. I acknowledged the search and rescue. Something you performed admirably under duress. Firelight glinted in Ariana's eyes. In an emergency, most people panic. Circumstances, my teacher was good. As we shared the wine, we sat closer together, our shoulders coming into contact. The intensity of the day had increased the tension from our last expedition. Marie, she said softly. Yes, last weekend is still on my mind. I do, too. This time, when she kissed me without hesitation, her warm, velvety lips tasted of wine, as well as wood smoke. Without thinking, I replied, my hand moving to cup her cheek as the kiss grew more intense. When we broke apart, and we were both breathing erratically, is it your tent or mine? She inquired, with a heart-pounding smile. We have just one tent. The issue has been resolved. By Tuesday morning, the rescue of Sarah Chen had made local news. From my desk, I watched the brief television segment, observing my own face for precisely 3 seconds as a bystander who had helped with the search. The reporter concentrated on the hunt and professionalism of the rescue crew, hardly acknowledging the 2 bystanders who had discovered her initially. Well done on the Chen rescue, Floyd said, showing up at my cubicle with his typical phony friendliness. I was unaware that environmental journalism was a part of search and rescue activities. Right time, wrong place. I continued typing in the hopes that he would follow the cue and go. Spending so much time in the wilderness with your guide. I didn't like the implication in his tone. Establishing credibility, acting as a group. I put down my keyboard. Floyd, what are you trying to say? No use. Simply observing that people can form strong emotional bonds through rescue operations. Risky ground for reporters. Attempting to remain impartial, he left before I could reply, leaving me to stare at my computer screen with increasing discomfort. Floyd was growing increasingly acerbic and intimately interested in my research techniques. My phone was buzzing. With an Ariana text, "This afternoon, are you free for coffee? Have a story to share with you. At a cafe. We first met, close to her store. As we navigated the odd new dynamic, we both ordered drinks that we hardly touched, between us. Everything had changed since Sunday night in the tent, and neither of us knew how to confront the change head-on. I finally said, "You said you had something to tell me." Ariana agitated her coffee needlessly. "I have never before been romantically involved with a journalist. Is a relationship what this is? I'm not sure." Her candor was frightening and refreshing. "I am aware that I can't get you off my mind. I am aware that Sunday night was amazing. But I am also aware of your mining story. Operation might have an impact on my coworkers." "In what way?" "The area that is contaminated is utilized by a number of guide services, including my primary rival. If the reputation of the area is harmed by your article, it might be detrimental to everyone's outdoor recreation business." There was a chill in my stomach. "Are you requesting that I not publish the story?" "No," she responded right away and firmly. "Although environmental crimes ought to be made public, I wanted you to be aware of the possible conflict of interest, both personal and professional." She briefly touched my hand across the table. "Marie, I love you, but I have concern for the preservation of the environment. Those things may not always line up." The discussion went on. For an additional hour, we are both attempting to set limits that will preserve our integrity as professionals while admitting that we are attracted to each other. We had arrived at an uncomfortable détente regarding keeping a professional distance until the story was released. I worked late that night at the office, at last moving forward with the piece that would reveal the illicit mining operation. The surroundings, corporate executives would face severe consequences because the damage was significant enough to warrant a federal investigation. Legal repercussions. My phone rang at midnight. The caller ID displayed Ariana's name. "Hey," I replied. I was shocked to hear from her at this late hour. Marie's voice had changed, softer. "Although I am aware that we agreed to uphold professional boundaries, I needed to hear what you had to say. It's late. I was unable to go to sleep. Remember Sunday night? All of a sudden, my apartment felt too warm. I understand that this is difficult. Ariana, I am aware that we are both attempting to act morally, think professionally, but I think I'm falling for you." Marie, the confession lingered between us during the phone call. I closed my eyes and recalled how her hands felt in my hair, the way she had muttered my name in the shadows of our communal tent. "This is crazy," I muttered. "I understand. I know that too, and I don't care if anyone finds out before the story runs. It's professional suicide for both of us." Before I could stop them, words were released. "I also can't stop thinking about you." There was silence, followed by her gasping laugh. "What should we do about it?" "Then, Marie, come on over, just for tonight. Please, we are able to, tomorrow, resolve the professional issues." 40 minutes later, she showed up with wet hair from the... It had begun to rain lightly. For a moment, we stood in my doorway, both of us conscious that we were going beyond the bounds of uncrossing was impossible. She questioned, "Are you sure about this?" Rather than, after verbally responding, I drew her inside and gave her a kiss on my closed front door. She responded right away, and fierce, pressing me back against the wood while her hands tangled in my hair. The cautious, expert distance we'd dissolved entirely as we found the electrical connection that had begun in that tent, and continued to do so for the entire week. In the middle of nowhere, as though we were attempting to make up for days of forced separation, our movements became desperate and urgent. Later, I tried not to think as I traced patterns on her shoulder while she was lying in my bed with her arm across my chest. About the complexity of it all, "No regrets," she said quietly. "None. I really did mean it. You alone must act as though this didn't happen tomorrow." But even as she stated that, we both understood that acting as though it hadn't, whatever this was between us, it had gone well beyond the bounds of professionalism, and there would be consequences that we were unable to foresee, but we were unaware of their imminence. Thursday morning brought the sort of unfavorable news that comes as a physical blow. When I got to work, I saw two men waiting in fancy suits. Before anyone could speak, their abrasive looks and briefcases were causing trouble in Eugene's office. "Marie, meet." With barely disguised annoyance, Eugene remarked, "Our legal friends from Consolidated Mining. They possess some worries about your next piece." The taller attorney was the first to speak. "We recognize that we're here to dispel some myths you might have about specific mining operations in northern Minnesota. In relation to regulatory compliance, what are the misunderstandings?" Despite my racing, I spoke at a level tone, heartbeat. "The allegation that our client broke environmental laws. We have records attesting to our complete adherence to all relevant laws." He moved a folder across Eugene's desk. permits for official searches, environmental, impact analyses, and regulatory approval pages. Everything seemed to be in order, which was impossible considering what I had personally seen. I've personally witnessed the contamination, I said. Stream water that is running dead and orange, vegetation, leftover chemicals, past mining operations. The second attorney made a seamless interjection. In reality, our client is working on environmental cleanup projects for conditions that already existed. Eugene was looking over the records with the look he saved for tales that would soon be lost. This makes a big difference. Marie, nothing is altered. I possess images, water samples, and proof of continuous environmental damage that were acquired illegally, infringement on someone else's property. According to the first attorney, any evidence obtained without the required consent would be unpublishable without subjecting this magazine to serious liability and inadmissible in court. The gathering went on for an additional hour as the attorneys methodically dissected each piece of evidence I had collected. They possessed legal threats wrapped in professional courtesy, documentation for every issue, and answers for everything. After leaving, Eugene shut the door to his office and looked at me with a look I had never seen him make before. I'm killing, Marie, the narrative. What? You can't be serious. Eugene, extremely serious. There is too much legal risk. Furthermore, their documentation calls into question the veracity of your reporting. To be honest, their records are fake. I personally witnessed the damage. How did you see it? Although trespassing on private property with an unreliable source whose company might suffer from bad press regarding the area, I was taken aback by the implication. Do you believe I was duped by Ariana? I believe you can't remain objective because you're too close to your source. Eugene's voice was tinged with disappointment, rather than rage. Marie, professional boundaries are necessary for professional relationships. When those lines become hazy, judgment is compromised. I felt as though I had been punched in the stomach when I left his office. The tale that ought to have corporate lawyers were bearing exposed environmental crimes, and my credibility as a professional was being questioned due to my connection to Ariana. Floyd was waiting at my desk, his contentment barely disguised. He claimed to have heard about the meeting while pretending to be sympathetic. The mining story was a difficult break. How did you find out about this getting together? In a small office. Word gets around quickly. He grinned slyly. Perhaps this will serve as a reminder to you of the value of professional ethics. What on earth does that mean? Simply, helpful guidance. Journalism and career suicide can result from combining business and pleasure, particularly when the pleasure includes sources who may be motivated by personal interests. I gazed at him as the pieces came together. You got in touch with the mining firm. I made no contact. However, if someone desired, they may investigate the reporter's research techniques to confirm facts about a potentially harmful story. Due diligence by professionals. You are a jerk. Be careful, Marie. Such accusations might be regarded as harassment at work. My phone rang before I could answer. The name of Ariana appears on the screen. I must see you. She spoke in a strained tone. We now met at her store, which was remarkably silent for a Thursday afternoon. Ariana appeared to have lost her sleep, as her typical assurance was replaced by, it appeared to be a barely contained panic attack. Without introducing herself, she stated, Johnny is asking questions about our business relationship. Her business partner and the financial wizard behind their guide service was Johnny Foster. I had only ever met him once, during my initial visit to the store. What sort of inquiries? Inquiries about professional ethics, client relationships, and whether I've kept proper distance from reporters who are looking for information. He has been conversing with someone. Must be. My personal life doesn't matter to Johnny unless it has an impact on the company. Behind the counter, she paced like an animal in a cage. If he believes that my professional standards have been compromised, Marie, he could end our collaboration by involving himself with a client. Is it legal for him to do that? Agreement for partnership gives either of us the ability to veto decisions that might harm the company's reputation. Clients of dating would be eligible. I could feel the walls closing in around me. This is being planned by someone. Floyd, my coworker, has been inquiring, pointed inquiries concerning our relationship. Your business partner is now abruptly worried about professional morals. Do you believe they are related? Someone is probably trying to discredit us both. Describe the lawyer's visit, the untold tale, and Floyd's overt threats to interfere with enjoyment. Ariana's pacing ceased. Thus, we must decide between our jobs and whatever else is between us. That's how it appears. In her, we stood, shop, filled with maps and gear for potential future adventures. We both understand that. It's possible that happiness and professional success are mutually exclusive. Marie, she said softly, I am aware. We could put a stop to this right now. Return to your role as a journalist and guide. Keep our careers safe. I don't want to. But we could. I don't either. The implication-laden silence that hung between us. Neither of us wanted to speak. Outside, Minneapolis went about its daily business as usual, while a relationship we weren't prepared to end caused our meticulously planned professional lives to fall apart. By Friday morning, I had created my choice. Corporate attorneys would make the wrong choice if they intended to use intimidation to cover up environmental crimes. Journalists to play with. I rewrote my story from scratch over the weekend, concentrating on publicly available data and recorded infractions of regulations from official databases. No charges of trespassing. Solid investigative journalism that was unaffected by costly legal threats and had no dubious sources. Now working on the weekends, Floyd found me at my desk before 7 a.m. on Monday morning and asked, investigating a few leads. Without glancing at him, I replied, I believed your mining story was destroyed by Eugene. Eugene destroyed one version of the narrative. I'm going in a different direction. His smugly expression changed to worry. You must exercise caution. Marie, there are some conflicts that are not worth waging, as if he had never stood up for anything in his life. I'm sorry. I looked him in the face. I am aware that you got in touch with Floyd at Consolidated Mining. I am aware that you have been undermining my story from the start. That's a grave charge. Show me incorrectly. Describe how corporate attorneys were aware of precisely which professional connections to doubt, precisely which evidence to refute. Floyd's expression hardened. Perhaps, Marie, your evidence was simply insufficient. Perhaps personal relationships clouded your judgment, which should never have evolved. Or perhaps you're envious that I discovered a compelling tale. While you've been penning meaningless articles about recycling programs, I at least uphold my professional standards. No, Floyd, you continue to act professionally. Mediocrity. A distinction exists. An hour later, Eugene called me into his office. Floyd's grievances have, predictably, quickly made it to the administrative level. Marie, I can appreciate how frustrated you are. However, disputes at work must remain professional. Then perhaps Floyd ought to behave professionally rather than undermining co-workers. A serious charge. Are you able to demonstrate it? Give me a week more. The tale of mining. A different strategy. Reliable sources. If Floyd's assertions regarding poor journalism are true, it's evident in my reporting. Eugene looked at me for a while. A week. But Marie, you might lose your job here if this doesn't work out. I've already ended it if I don't try. Later that day, Ariana had better news when she called. She said, Johnny's backing down. With a tone of relief, exits. His worries are based on rival rumors rather than concrete proof of professional wrongdoing. Someone has been spreading false information about us. However, Johnny conducted research, spoke with customers, and verified our real business procedures. No violations of partnership agreements were discovered. Thus, for the time being, your company is secure. What? Regarding your narrative. Developing a fresh strategy that corporate lawyers cannot ignore. Do you need assistance? I grinned as I recalled why her integrity had initially drawn me in. Yes, in fact. However, this time, until the story is published, everything remains completely professional. I get it. What are you in need of? Public land access, government property, close to the mining site, free of trespassing concerns, and your proficiency in identifying patterns of environmental damage. Over the following 3 days, we documented contamination that had spread into public watersheds from private mining property. All of the photos were taken from legal angles. Each sample was taken from a public stream. Each measurement was taken using GPS coordinates that would be visible in court. Ariana noted, this is actually stronger evidence than what we found on their private property, measuring the pH of the water downstream from the mining activity. Property lines are not respected by contamination. That's precisely the point. They can restrict who has access to their property, but they are powerless to conceal harm to public assets. By Thursday, I had a story that was both environmentally devastating and legally sound. Business leaders had lied to regulators, broke federal clean water laws, and harmed the environment in ways that would take decades to fix. Eugene became increasingly excited as he read the draft. Marie, this is excellent work, very sturdy, powerful, sufficient for publication, enough strength to take home honors. On Friday morning, the story was published. Photographs that depicted environmental destruction in striking detail on the front page above the fold. By midday, Eugene was taking calls for follow-up interviews from television news programs. The environment, he told the staff that the protection agency is initiating a federal investigation. Business leaders are dealing with criminal accusations. Fantastic work, Marie. Floyd's congrats were noticeably absent, but I didn't mind. The narrative was released, justice would be served, and the environment would be preserved. Ariana and I celebrated that night by having dinner at a fancy restaurant that seemed almost comically civilized following weeks of hiking and camping. To environmental journalism, lifting her wine glass, she spoke, To professional integrity, I answered, and to determining our next course of action. For days, the question had lingered unsaid. But now that expert, boundaries were no longer a concern, and we could explore the potential of this relationship without regard to career complications. I asked, "What do you want to happen next?" and always received an honest response. "I'm interested to see where this goes when we're not concerned with professional matters." She reached across the table to take my hand. "Corporate lawyers, ethics, or sabotage. Just us. Just us." Later that evening in my apartment, we made love with a passion that had grown over the course of weeks due to all the outside pressures and work-related issues. There were no sleeping bags or tents this time, and we were just getting to know one another without hurrying or hiding. Entirely, our relationship felt deeper and different now, free from the work-related worries that had complicated everything previously. This time, no regrets. She traced languid lines across my chest before asking. She dozed off in my arms and said, "None. You, only that it took us so long to get here." Weapons, I came to understand that defending the narrative had involved more than just professional or environmental preservation. Integrity, it had been about demonstrating that some things were worth taking, worth the difficulties, and worth standing up for, despite the efforts of influential individuals to keep you quiet. The mining executives would be charged with federal crimes. Floyd's, Ariana and I would decide what to do next, one day at a time, while my career would stall in professional mediocrity. I was standing in Eugene's office with an award notification that was still in effect 3 months after the mining story broke. Felt unreal. Eugene read aloud with the Environmental Journalism Excellence Award. Evident pride. "This is the first time our magazine has received national recognition in this category." I said it was a team effort, but we both were aware that the story had been an individual triumph over significant resistance. National Geographic wishes to talk about, he added, environmental beat based in Denver. Significant career advancement, the opportunity to pursue environmental protection full-time, a national platform, and a dream job should have made the offer exciting. Focus. Rather, the thought of leaving Minneapolis made my stomach turn. When do they need an answer? Marie? This is a huge opportunity that only comes once a month. In a career, I thanked him before returning to my desk, where Floyd was noticeably missing. His resignation, the day after my story led to federal indictments. A letter had surfaced stating philosophical disagreements with editorial direction. Ariana texted me, buzzing my phone. "Lunch is free." We met at our regular cafe, but recently our relationship had progressed to a level that went well beyond professional distance and covert meetings. She had been spending 3 nights a week at my apartment, and I'd been assisting her in updating marketing materials for her business that focused on environmental education in addition to outdoor recreation. After we placed our order, she said, "You look troubled." "I got a job offer from National Geographic in Denver." Her fork stopped in mid-mouth. "That's amazing. Congratulations. I haven't accepted it yet." "Why not?" Ariana put down her fork and looked at my face, saying, "Because it would mean leaving Minneapolis. We've been dating for 3 months. Marie, you can't pass up professional opportunities for a relationship that's still working itself out. Can't I? Eventually, you'd be angry with me. And I'm sorry I didn't take the chance." Her reason was annoying and probably right. "What are you saying? Clean break, long-distance relationship." In fact, she smiled and said that indicated that she had been preparing this discussion. "I have a third choice." She produced a folder with business, create marketing plans, financial forecasts, plan documents, and support environmental journalism trips. Wilderness trips created especially for photographers and environmental reporters. With increasing amazement, I scanned the documents. She created a thorough business plan by fusing her advising, proficiency with instructional elements pertaining to conservation, sustainable tourism, and environmental reporting. I thought this photography was amazing. But how does it relate to my work? Offer, a chance for collaboration. You supply the journalism know-how. I supply the wilderness expertise. We could establish operations anywhere there is a noteworthy environmental story. Potential. For example, Colorado, Montana, Wyoming, Alaska, or any other place. The concept was bold, dangerous, and flawless. Rather, instead of having to choose between a career and a relationship, we could create something that merged our two passions into a sustainable business model. Would you sacrifice your well-established guide service for this? Johnny is purchasing my portion. In any case, I want to concentrate on traditional recreation tours, while he wants to concentrate on environmental education. Clean split. Everyone's needs are met. And when National Geographic rejects freelance agreements, we work with other publications to expand our clientele. Marie publications require specialized field expertise, and environmental journalism is expanding. I looked at her across the table, this woman who had come into my life during a pottery class and somehow managed to become the person I couldn't. Can you imagine your life without partnership? I said slowly, both personal and professional, if you're interested. Rather than responding right away, I leaned across the table and gave her a kiss, regardless of who may be observing or what professional lines we may be stepping over. Some choices were too significant to describe. When we split up, I said, I'll call National Geographic tomorrow. Offer a freelance contract based on with specialized environmental field reporting in Denver. If they decline, then we'll work it out with other clients. 6 months later, I was standing on a mountainside in Colorado, observing Ariana instruct a group of environmental photographers from 3 different magazines. With customers scheduling trips months in advance, our business had expanded more quickly than either of us had predicted. Progress. Knowing the science underlying the subject you're photographing is essential to environmental photography. Ariana was pointing to a valley that was obviously affected by the effects of climate change on the health of the forest. Asked the photographers about their experiences collecting information for a piece about the convergence of environmental education and journalism. In addition to accepting my freelance proposal, National Geographic had commissioned a series about creative methods of reporting on the environment. That night by our campfire, one of the photographers inquired about our business relationship. It must be difficult to collaborate, she noted, both personally and professionally. Ariana and I looked at each other, recalling the complex. It works because we respect each other's expertise, Ariana said, referring to the early stages of our relationship. Boundaries do exist, but they don't have to be obstacles to interpersonal relationships. I also mentioned that trust is crucial in the business world and relationships. Ariana and I later sat by the dying after our clients had gone to sleep. Fire, sipping wine, and organizing the itinerary for the expedition the following month. Any regrets about leaving Minneapolis? She inquired, and as I gazed upon the Colorado wilderness, I thought, regarding the important work we were doing together, I thought back to the kiss that began it all at a Minneapolis cultural celebration that seemed to have taken place ages ago. None, I said, meaning it entirely. She leaned over to kiss me tenderly beneath stars that appeared to be close enough to touch. But it took us a long time to realize what we genuinely desired. Some tales conclude with dramatic announcements or transformative discoveries. Ours ended quietly. Assurance, the type that results from meeting someone who completes you and pushes you professionally. Personally, someone worth overcoming professional barriers, corporate lawyers, and geographic distance to be with. The company prospered, the bond grew, and the need to share environmental stories persisted. People who are prepared to get their hands dirty in order to find the truth. As it turned out, perfect endings weren't about big motions. They focused on making decisions every day to create a meaningful relationship with someone who shared your values and made you laugh around campfires in the woods and questioned your preconceptions.